I never thought I would find myself in a place like this. Just a few weeks ago, the idea of putting on a bra, or even thinking about heels, felt like stepping into a world I didn't belong to. But here I was, standing in front of a mirror in my small bedroom, the soft light casting gentle shadows on my face, feeling a mix of fear, excitement, and something I couldn't quite name. I had always been curious about crossdressing, but curiosity and action are two very different things.
Tonight, I was taking that step.
Tonight, I was going to see what it really felt like to present myself differently, to explore a part of myself I had kept locked away. I remember staring at the bra for what felt like hours. It was simple, black, nothing extravagant, but in my hands, it suddenly seemed like a strange, foreign object. My hands trembled slightly as I tried to imagine wearing it. I thought about all the times I had envied the ease and confidence some people seem to have in their bodies, how clothes could transform, not just appearance, but how you felt. I didn't want to just put it on. I wanted to experience it fully, to see if it could awaken something inside me. The first step was taking off my shirt, feeling the air brush against my skin, my heart beating faster with anticipation. Slipping the bra on was harder than I expected. There were hooks, straps, adjustments, and for a moment I panicked, unsure if I was doing it right. But as I finally managed to fasten it, something shifted. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and for a fleeting moment, I didn't recognize who I was. It wasn't magic, it wasn't instant, but there was a strange sense of possibility, a spark of identity that felt entirely new. I didn't feel like a different person. I felt like I was finally seeing a hidden layer of myself. Then came the heels. I had bought them weeks ago, something simple, nothing too flashy, but holding them in my hands, I realized I had never paid this much attention to footwear before. They were elegant, narrow, a little intimidating, and I couldn't help but wonder how walking in them would feel. My first attempt was awkward. My balance was off, my steps uncertain, and I stumbled more than once. But each time I looked in the mirror, I noticed something subtle. My posture shifted, my shoulders softened, my movements began to mimic the grace I had seen in others wearing heels. There was a confidence budding inside me, fragile but real, and I wanted to hold on to it. I spent hours that night experimenting, trying different outfits, looking at myself from different angles, adjusting the bra, practicing walking in the heels. There were moments of frustration, moments when I laughed at how ridiculous I must have looked, but underneath it all, there was this quiet thrill, this sense of discovery that I had never experienced before. It was more than clothes. It was an exploration of identity, an opening of a door I hadn't dared to touch until now. By the end of the night, I felt exhausted, exhilarated, and strangely peaceful. Standing in front of the mirror one last time, I traced the lines of my face, the curves of my body in a way I had never done before. There was still fear there, sure, the fear of judgment, of uncertainty, of what this meant about me, but there was also curiosity, a quiet insistence that maybe this was something I deserved to explore. As I took off the bra and slipped out of the heels, I promised myself I wouldn't stop here. This was only the beginning, the first chapter of a journey I wasn't entirely ready to name, but one I knew I wanted to continue. I laid in bed that night, still in my pajamas, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every feeling. There was a strange calmness, a sense that I had opened a door inside myself, and even if I didn't know what lay beyond, I was no longer afraid to peek. This was my first real step into a new world, a world where I could explore, transform, and perhaps, finally, accept parts of myself I had ignored for too long. The next morning, I woke up with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Last night had left me buzzing with possibilities, and now I couldn't stop thinking about what came next. I had tasted that strange, liberating thrill of seeing myself in a way I had never dared to before, and it was calling me back. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it felt like an itch I needed to scratch, a part of me that needed to be acknowledged. I started small that day. I rummaged through my closet, picking out softer fabrics, brighter colors, something that felt less like a disguise and more like me experimenting with myself. There was a blouse I had bought months ago, one I never wore because it felt too much. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, running my fingers along the smooth fabric. imagining how it would drape over me. Then, with a deep breath, I slipped it on. The moment the fabric brushed against my skin, I shivered. Not from cold, but from awareness. I was aware of every curve, every movement, every small gesture. The mirror didn't just reflect my body, it reflected possibilities. I decided to try makeup for the first time. Nothing extravagant, just a little eyeliner and lip balm, but even these small steps felt monumental. I had always watched tutorials, read blogs, and admired people online, but now I was doing it myself. My hands were clumsy at first, smudging, wiping, starting over, but slowly, I began to find a rhythm. And when I finally looked in the mirror after what felt like hours, I saw a version of me that was both familiar and new. It wasn't about hiding who I was. It was about expressing layers of myself I had ignored for too long. By mid-afternoon, I found myself staring at the heels again. The ones from last night. They were waiting for me on the floor, almost like silent companions, challenging me. I slipped them on, feeling the strange elevation and pressure on my feet. Walking was awkward still, but there was a rhythm forming, a balance that was beginning to feel natural. Every step made me more aware of how I carried myself, how my movements could change just by adjusting posture or the tilt of a shoulder. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I could feel it, my body learning a new language, a language I had always feared to speak. That evening, I decided to go a step further. I wanted to test myself in public, but not too far. Just a short walk down my quiet street. I slipped into my outfit, carefully adjusted my bra, brushed my hair, and put on the heels. Standing at the doorway, I felt a rush of panic. What if someone laughed? What if someone recognized me? My chest tightened and my hands shook slightly. But then I reminded myself, this was about me, not anyone else. Taking a deep breath, I stepped outside. The air hit me differently, softer somehow. I could feel eyes on me, or maybe I was imagining it, but it didn't matter. I walked slowly, deliberately, feeling the unfamiliar balance of the heels under my feet. Each step made me more confident, and by the time I returned to my doorstep, I realized I had been smiling the entire time. I hadn't felt this alive in months, maybe years. Back inside, I collapsed on the couch, exhausted but elated. My reflection in the window caught my eye, and for the first time, I saw more than just a person experimenting with clothes. I saw someone embracing complexity, someone learning to navigate the delicate balance between fear and freedom. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't a phase, a game, or something temporary. This was a journey that I was just beginning, and one that I wanted to explore fully, step by step, outfit by outfit, emotion by emotion. As night fell, I thought about tomorrow, about trying new styles, new accessories, maybe even practicing different ways of presenting myself. There was a thrill in the unknown, a pull toward transformation that I couldn't resist. And deep down, I knew that every misstep, every stumble in heels, every awkward moment in makeup or clothing was part of this journey. It wasn't about perfection. It was about discovery, about honesty, about seeing myself in ways I had been too afraid to imagine. The days that followed felt like stepping into a new rhythm of life. I found myself waking up with a strange sense of anticipation, almost like a secret I couldn't wait to explore. Each morning became an experiment. A blouse today, a skirt tomorrow, experimenting with colors, textures, and the way different fabrics hugged my body. Some mornings I felt confident, almost buoyant, like I had discovered a new dimension of myself. Other mornings I felt a wave of doubt, a gnawing fear that maybe I was overstepping, that perhaps this path wasn't meant for me. One evening, I decided to push myself further. I had been practicing in my room and on the quiet street, but tonight I wanted to see if I could bring this version of myself into a more public setting. There was a small cafe a few blocks away that I liked, a cozy place with warm lighting and soft music. I imagined sitting there, sipping a coffee, and simply existing as the person I was beginning to explore. My hands trembled as I laid out my outfit, a delicate blouse, a flowing skirt, the familiar bra, and of course, the heels. I spent extra time on my hair, brushing and styling it until I almost didn't recognize the reflection in the mirror. When I stepped outside, the city felt different. The evening lights cast long shadows, and the streets were dotted with people heading home, chatting, laughing, living their lives. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and strangely exhilarated all at once. Each step in my heels was deliberate, careful, a conversation between my body and the unfamiliar footwear. I kept my head high, my shoulders back, reminding myself that this wasn't a performance for anyone else. It was a test of my own courage. The walk to the cafe was longer than I expected, partly because I was careful with my balance, partly because every sound, every glance made me acutely aware of myself. And yet, there was a thrill in that awareness, a sense of being fully present, fully alive. When I finally pushed open the cafe door, the warm smell of coffee and baked goods enveloped me, and for a moment, I almost forgot the fear. I found a quiet corner, sat down, and let the reality sink in. I was here, in public, not hiding, not pretending, just existing as myself. But the moment wasn't without tension. A group of people near the counter glanced in my direction, and I felt that familiar pang of doubt. What if they stared too long? What if they whispered? I gripped my cup tightly, telling myself it didn't matter. My reflection in the dark window across the room caught my eye, and I had to laugh quietly at myself. Here I was, nervous and trembling, and yet undeniably me. There was a strange power in that acknowledgement, in allowing myself to be seen even when fear tried to tell me to hide. After I finished my coffee, I walked back home slowly, savoring the steps, feeling the balance in my heels, noticing how the skirt swayed with each movement. When I finally entered my apartment, I leaned against the door and let out a long breath. I had done it. I had faced a small but significant fear, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, nothing had gone wrong at all. I realized that the fear wasn't about being judged. It was about confronting my own vulnerability, letting myself exist in a way I had long denied. That night, I lay in bed, reflecting on the day. There was a quiet sense of pride, mixed with relief and exhaustion. I thought about the person I was discovering, the parts of me that had always been there but hidden, waiting for a chance to emerge. I realized that transformation wasn't just about clothes or heels or even makeup. It was about understanding myself, giving myself permission to explore, and finding courage in small, deliberate actions. I knew the journey was far from over. There would be days of doubt, moments when I felt awkward or unsure, and perhaps even setbacks. But I also knew there would be moments of joy, discovery, and a deepening connection with who I was becoming. Every step, every outfit, every mirror reflection was part of a story I was writing, one layer at a time. And for the first time, I felt ready to keep writing, no matter how uncertain or strange the path ahead might seem. A week later, I realized something was changing inside me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about clothes, makeup, or heels anymore. It was about how I saw myself, how I felt in my own skin. Every glance in the mirror became an exploration, every outfit an experiment, every step a test of confidence. But with that excitement came a new wave of doubt, subtle and insistent. I found myself hesitating, questioning whether I was doing the right thing, whether people would accept this version of me if they truly saw me. It started one evening when I tried on a new dress I had bought online. The fabric was soft, the color flattering, the cut elegant. I stood in front of the mirror, tracing the lines of the dress with my fingers, imagining myself wearing it outside. But as I looked closer, I saw imperfections, or what I thought were imperfections. My chest didn't sit right, my posture felt awkward, and for a moment, I was overwhelmed by the fear that I was fooling myself, pretending to be someone I wasn't. I sat on the edge of my bed, the dress pooling around my knees, and took a deep breath. I reminded myself of why I had started this journey, not to impress anyone, not to meet anyone's expectations, but to explore who I truly was, to embrace parts of myself I had ignored for too long. The doubt was still there, but now it felt manageable, like a small shadow compared to the light of discovery that had been growing inside me. That night, I decided to challenge myself further. I carefully applied makeup, practiced my posture, and put on the heels I was beginning to master. I practiced walking across my apartment, each step deliberate, each movement a conversation with my own reflection. And then, almost impulsively, I decided to record myself. Not to share, not yet, but to watch and see what I looked like through an unfiltered lens. Watching the video later, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was proud. I could see the growth, the poise I had been developing. On the other hand, there was vulnerability, a rawness I wasn't used to facing. Seeing myself from a different perspective forced me to acknowledge my fears, my insecurities, and also the small triumphs that had built over the past weeks. It was an emotional roller coaster, and I realized that part of this journey was learning to hold space for all of it. The doubt, the pride, the awkwardness, and the exhilaration. The next day brought another challenge. A friend had invited me over for a small gathering, and I hesitated. Part of me wanted to cancel, to hide, to stay in my room where everything felt safe. But another part of me wanted to take a step further, to exist as this new version of myself in front of someone else, even if it was just a friend. I spent hours preparing, choosing the outfit carefully, practicing my movements, and rehearsing how I might act if someone noticed. It was nerve-wracking, and my heart raced as I approached the door, heels clicking softly against the pavement. When I arrived, my friend greeted me with a smile. Nothing more, nothing less. And just like that, a huge wave of relief washed over me. No judgment, no awkwardness, just a simple acknowledgement of my presence. I realized in that moment how much of my fear had been internal, how much of it was about accepting myself before anyone else could. The gathering passed uneventfully, but the impact stayed with me. I felt lighter, more capable, more certain that this journey wasn't about other people's approval, it was about self-acceptance. That night, back in my apartment, I reflected on everything. The bra, the heels, the dresses, the makeup, they were tools, yes, but what mattered most was the courage to explore, the patience to learn, and the vulnerability to face myself honestly. I realized that transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional, mental, and deeply personal. And as I lay down, exhausted but exhilarated, I knew that the path ahead would continue to challenge me, but that I was ready to meet it. The journey was far from over. There would be awkward moments, missteps, moments of doubt and fear, but each one was a lesson, each one a chance to grow. I felt a quiet pride in how far I had come, and a quiet excitement for the future, for all the possibilities that awaited me, for all the layers of myself I had yet to explore. By the time part 5 of my journey arrived, I realized something fundamental had changed. This wasn't about a single outfit, a single night, or even a single experience. It was about layers of growth, moments of courage, and the quiet strength that came from facing myself honestly. I had learned to navigate the fear, to balance the thrill of discovery with the vulnerability it demanded, but I also knew that the next steps would test me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It started with a trip to the store. I had been avoiding crowded places, partly because of nerves, partly because I wasn't sure I could handle strangers' stares or whispers. But I wanted to challenge myself, to see how far I could go in this exploration. I carefully selected my outfit, a soft, flowing blouse that fell just right over my shoulders, a skirt that swayed with every step, and, of course, the heels I was becoming more comfortable with. I spent extra time on my hair and makeup, taking care to make myself feel confident and presentable, not perfect. As I stepped outside, the weight of the day hit me. People passed by, faces blurred in motion, some glancing, some not, but it didn't matter. I focused on my own stride, the rhythm of my heels, the way my posture felt stronger, more deliberate. There was a tension in the air, a quiet suspense that made every step feel significant. And then, as I walked past a small group waiting at a crosswalk, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration, the awareness that I was visible, fully visible, and yet nothing catastrophic happened. I felt a surge of pride, almost like I had proven something to myself that had nothing to do with anyone else. At the store, I wandered the aisles slowly, deliberately, observing everything around me. Every movement was conscious, the tilt of my head, the way I adjusted my blouse, the sway of my skirt. I caught glimpses of myself in the reflective surfaces and smiled quietly each time. There was a growing sense of ease in the awareness that I could exist in this form, in this presentation, without shame, without fear controlling me. I bought a few small items, snacks, a new scarf, a pair of simple earrings, and walked to the checkout with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt before. Returning home, I reflected on the small victories of the day. Each interaction, each step, each decision to show up as myself had been a challenge, a lesson in courage and self-acceptance. I realized that transformation wasn't just about appearances, it was about learning to trust myself, to honor my own desires, and to navigate the world while holding space for the person I was becoming. That evening, I decided to experiment further. I pulled out a dress I had admired online for months, but had been too nervous to try. I slipped it on, adjusted the bra and straps, put on the heels, and stood in front of the mirror. I turned slowly, examining the lines of the dress, the way it flowed over my body, the way it made me feel. I practiced walking back and forth, noticing the sway of my hips, the way my posture changed subtly with every step. And then I caught my reflection in a window, faint light from the street outside catching the fabric just right, and for a moment, I didn't recognize the person I saw, but in the best possible way. It wasn't someone else. It was me, fully present, fully myself, and fully unafraid. As I sat down that night, exhausted but exhilarated, I thought about how far I had come. From the nervous excitement of my first bra and heels to walking through the streets in public, every step had been a journey of courage and self-discovery. I realized that the most important transformation wasn't in the clothes or the heels, it was in how I saw myself, how I allowed myself to exist authentically, and how I found joy in the smallest expressions of who I was becoming. There was a quiet thrill in knowing that tomorrow, and the days after that, I could push boundaries even further. I could try new outfits, explore new styles, and continue to challenge my fears. Every stumble, every misstep, every awkward moment was part of the story, part of the growth. And as I lay in bed that night, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the experiences, but for myself, for the courage I had found to face the unknown and embrace it fully. The days after my trip to the store felt different, almost lighter. I could sense a shift inside me, a growing confidence that wasn't loud or showy, but quiet and resilient. I realized that the journey I had begun weeks ago, tentative, nervous, filled with curiosity and fear, had become something more than just trying on clothes or walking in heels. It had become a process of understanding myself, accepting myself, and even celebrating the parts of me I had hidden for far too long. I spent the morning experimenting with outfits again, but this time there was less hesitation. The bra, the blouse, the skirts, the heels, they no longer felt like foreign objects or tools to become someone else. They were extensions of me, expressions of the self I had always carried but hadn't allowed to flourish. I practiced walking, sitting, turning in front of the mirror, noticing how my movements changed subtly with posture and confidence. It was exhilarating, yes, but also calming in a way I hadn't expected. I felt grounded in my body, in my choices, and in the reflections staring back at me. Later, I decided to venture out to a larger public space, a small park I frequented for quiet walks. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the paths, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees. I wore a dress that flowed comfortably, a new pair of heels that had taken a little getting used to, and a light jacket over my shoulders. Each step was deliberate, confident, and free. I noticed people passing by, some glancing, some absorbed in their own lives. And yet, the usual pang of fear or self-consciousness didn't take hold. I walked with my head high, feeling a quiet pride in how far I had come. Sitting on a bench, I watched the world move around me, children running, dogs barking, couples strolling hand in hand. For the first time, I felt fully integrated into that world, not hidden, not performing, but present. I reflected on the journey. The first tentative touch of a bra strap on my skin, the awkward steps in my first heels, the nervous experimentation with makeup, the small but powerful victories of public outings. Every moment had been a test, an exploration, a learning experience. And every moment had brought me closer to understanding who I truly was. I realized that transformation wasn't about a single look or a single outfit. It was about courage, curiosity, and the willingness to face fear head-on. It was about patience, kindness to oneself, and the joy of discovery. I felt a quiet sense of gratitude for myself, for the bravery it had taken to begin, for the persistence that had carried me through awkwardness and doubt, and for the growing love I had learned to hold for this evolving version of me. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow across the park, I stood and began to walk back home. Each step felt light, yet significant, a rhythm of freedom and self-assurance. I glanced at my reflection in a window, smiled at the person staring back, and finally felt complete, not because I had arrived, but because I was embracing the journey, moment by moment. Back in my apartment, I carefully removed the outfit, the bra and the heels, folding them neatly as I had always done. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror one last time that evening, and I realized how far I had come. I had faced doubt, vulnerability, and fear, and emerged stronger, more authentic, and more self-aware than I had ever imagined possible. This journey had begun with curiosity and hesitation, but it had transformed into self-discovery, courage, and a celebration of identity. Every step, every mirror reflection, every small victory had shaped me into someone who could face the world as themselves, fearful at times, awkward at times, but always authentic. And as I finally lay down, exhausted but exhilarated, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey wasn't over. There would be more experiments, more discoveries, more challenges, but I knew I had found something invaluable, the courage to embrace who I truly was, without apology, without fear, and with a growing sense of joy. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel.